A new week, a new Night Lord analysis. In today's video, I'm going to discuss Gnoster, Wisdom of Night, possible references, and the story of this duo, or trio of insects, fighting for their survival. Once again, with Gnoster we can clearly see From Software's commitment to incredible design, intriguing lore, and a sense of uniqueness that leaves players in awe. So, let's begin a journey through biology and survivor. What we know as the sentient pest is a fusion of two insects. A moth called Gnoster and a prehistoric-looking insect that resembles a scorpion called Faurtis Stoneshield. In the second part of the video, I will compare Faurtis' physical form with an animal from the Ordovician age, an ancestor of crustaceans. The origin of the name Faurtis came from Latin fortis, which means strong and naturally powerful. Once again, we can compare it to Portuguese. We use the word forte to describe someone who is physically strong. The Knight of the Wise relic, which we receive after defeating this Night Lord, states, "The secluded forest was being eaten away by the surrounding desert, and when the blessing of water passed over its many leaves and boughs, thus began a great exodus of its creatures." To survive, the insects would have to adapt, so began their prolonged and perilous journey. What we can understand here is that these insects united in a symbiotic way in search of survival after the desertification of their forest. This process takes place over millennia, meaning they are ancient beings who witnessed their habitat being destroyed by unknown forces. The forests mentioned here might be the same as the recluses, though this remains uncertain. In any case, the appearance of Faurtis makes it clear just how ancient they might be. What's curious is that these creatures are sapient in some way, at least Gnoster, known as Wisdom of Night, whose name comes from the Greek gnosis, meaning knowledge or awareness. A fun fact: the term Gnoster also relates to Gnostic, meaning a person with broad knowledge, an intellectual who possesses more understanding than others. Naturally, it's impossible not to think of Gnosticism, which connects to the history of Christianity before the creation of a centralized church in Rome, a time when people believed, in a deeply philosophical way, that each human being possessed a fragment of God within them, trapped inside a physical body that would eventually perish. To reach true enlightenment, humans had to transcend this inferior physical body, and this was only possible through knowledge. Gnosticism is a highly interesting and complex philosophical discussion, which uses Plato and Greek philosophy to justify its ideas. In any case, for the moth to be named Gnoster, it is clear the developer envisioned it as a wise being capable of controlling the body of another insect, however peacefully, as I don't believe Gnoster parasited Faurtis, but rather that there is a symbiotic relationship between the two insects. And then, something happens in its ever-dark version. When Gnoster or Faurtis falls, a new being appears, Animus, Ascendant Light. Animus is a reddish, ethereal being that resembles a moth. It looks more like a spirit than an animal, and is capable of resurrecting Gnoster or Faurtis. The Night Fairies can only attack animals at the specific moments during the fight, when it's resurrecting one of the creatures, or when it is actively attacking. Animus doesn't attack the Night Fairies directly, except during certain moments in the fight, like when it unleashes a rain of lightning across the arena. The name Animus comes from the Latin anima, meaning soul or spirit. If we think about the expression mind, body, and soul working together, many of the situations we witness begin to make more sense. A good example is when Animus tries to resurrect Faurtis and Gnoster, but has its own life drained in the process. This shows that it is some kind of soul for these creatures, and existence is bound to theirs, responding to the willpower of these insects. Every time they are resurrected, a piece of Animus falls apart, since the willpower of Gnoster and Faurtis is also fading. Anyway, I will talk more about possible theories in the second part of the video. Another curious point during this fight is that Animus, after a while of possessing Gnoster or Faurtis, leaves the host's body and floats above everyone. But why insects? What does this Night Lord represent for the universe of Lingveld? Gnoster, Faurtis, and Animus can all be classified within the phylum Arthropoda, the largest phylum in the animal kingdom. Gnoster and Animus are insects, while Faurtis is a type of prehistoric sea scorpion, as I will explain later. Gnoster and Animus are clearly inspired by moths, insects with a robust body shape, similar to butterflies but lacking the colorful wings of their daytime relatives. Moths also have hair on their bodies, unlike the more slender and agile butterflies. Insects are six-legged invertebrates, resilient creatures that inhabit virtually every corner of the planet and make up the largest group of animals, accounting for over half of all animal species. Insects are often seen as pests by humans, especially due to the spread of urban infestations. The major problem with this perception is that much of the insect population has been declining over the decades, and few species within the class have been able to adapt quickly enough to survive. The most well-known example is the potential extinction of bees and butterflies, something humanity may witness over the next centuries. So, the idea of Gnoster and Faurtis fleeing from the possible extinction in their natural habitat is not hardly related to the real extinction of countless animal species. Finally, the oldest fossil of insects comes from the Devonian period, in the Paleozoic era, approximately 400 million years ago. And, as you will notice, this prehistoric theme will be repeated several times throughout this part of the video. And what about Faurtis? The Stoneshield has been seen by many as a kind of scorpion, though still distinctive. I agree with that, but to me, it closely resembles animals from the order Euripteridae, an order of extinct marine arthropods that resembled sea scorpions, although they weren't arachnids. Euripterids existed during the Devonian and Ordovician periods over 400 million years ago. Faurtis look very similar to the Stenolodina, rare even in their time, which had 6 legs used for walking along the ocean floor. This would explain the choice of this animal as an inspiration for the game, since these arthropods lived in water, just like Faurtis fled from his forest once it ceased to have water. Another curiosity is that Euripterids could grow to immense sizes, being among the largest arthropods to ever exist, reaching up to 2.5 meters, much like our friend Faurtis. While Faurtis, or Bouncer, as he is called in the game files, is responsible for physical damage, Gnoster the moth can attack the night fairies with poison and also by depositing parasite eggs in their bodies. This ties back to the idea of venomous, poisonous insects capable of causing poisoning or intoxication in humans. Most insects reproduce by laying eggs, so it's only natural for Gnoster to try the same with the night fairies in a desperate attempt to reproduce. Curiously, the eggs he lays look very similar to the butterfly or moth eggs. As the description of Sentient Pest Expedition states, if moth poison is ingested, it will eat through the host, a parasite that cannot be removed alone. And speaking of parasites, many insects are known for being parasitic to other species or even to other insects. Some are known to be symbiotic parasites, meaning their presence is beneficial to the host, which to me seems to be the case here. Faurtis benefits from Gnoster's magical and wise presence, likely the one who orchestrated their escape from the forest, while the moth needed the athletic body of the arthropod to survive. And now some speculations. As I mentioned throughout the video, there is a prehistoric element to Faurtis, but not just to him. Nightreign is full of elements evoking a time lost to millennia. Caligo and Adele, for example, share the same ancient aura. There are also references to the Paleozoic periods and how those periods lent their names to some of the Crucible Knights we know in Elden Ring, Devonia and Ordovis, for example. I talked more about this in my video on the Crucible Knights, but with Each passing day, it feels like Nightreign brings more and more prehistoric elements tied to this ancient, unknown Crucible era. In other words, it becomes harder not to connect the game with the very essence of the Crucible and all that represents, including why so many Night Lords are animals or possess animalistic traits. Gladius, Adele, Gnoster, Faurtis, Caligo, Libra, and Fulgor. It is as if Lingveld and that universe were a reality where the influence of the Crucible remained powerful, as there was no force to oppose it. Gnoster is also depicted as the wisdom of night, in other words, a sapient being, another animal that thinks, far from what one might expect from, well, insects. To me, and this is speculative, Gnoster and Faurtis were animals that survived extinction and learned to live in symbiosis. But what about Animus? What is it? Animus seems to possess something akin to a nervous system and can revive both creatures. Yet it is an ethereal being, almost lacking a physical form. It is as if Animus were the soul of Gnoster, perhaps one that was already dead, now simply reanimated to fight. What this means is that it is as if Gnoster willpower created a new, powerful and free form, but incorporeal, capable of resurrecting both its body and its mind. Why do I say this? It is impossible not to think of Spinoza, the 17th century Dutch philosopher, a critic of Descartes, and who said in his book Ethics, "The human mind cannot be absolutely destroyed with the body, but something of it remains which is eternal." Is this something that survives from the mind that becomes eternal, eternal like animals, like the soul? For Spinoza, the soul was nothing more than part of the mind, since the concept of the soul as something separated from body and mind wasn't commonly debated among philosophers of his time. For him, the soul doesn't abandon the body upon death, rather, the mind seeks survival through eternity. And this is very reminiscent of Gnoster and Faurtis. Soul and body are one. If the soul is merely a part of the mind, then Animus belongs to both beings. This would also explain why Animus is harmed every time it tries to resurrect Gnoster and Faurtis. This also makes sense when considering that in some cultures, including Japanese myths, the butterfly is a symbol of the soul, the animus. In Greek mythology, for example, Physike, the wife of Cupid, is depicted with butterfly wings, and her name can also be translated as butterfly or moth. Moreover, Homer makes it clear in the Iliad that the spirit, in Greek Physike, lives through the mouth of the deceased, a sign the soul has left the physical body. But that the spirit of man should come again when once it hath passed the barrier of his teeth. Finally, something I wanted to mention briefly is the fact that Faurtis, in his initial design, appeared headless, something that didn't make it into the game, at least not yet. It is as if Gnoster was meant to emerge directly from his head, yet another sign tying it to the Greek myth of the butterfly, the soul leaving the body of the deceased. In the end, Gnoster, Faurtis, and Animus shows how the developers cannot make only a simple fight with a powerful boss. They are survivors, just like so many other Night Lords. But they are also an incredible mixture of biology, philosophy, and myths. Through these creatures, we can reflect on the struggle for survival in the face of extinction. If you enjoy this kind of content, where I explore the intersection of video game lore, history, and literature, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching. Until next time, bye!